Tonight we present
The Disappearance of Brandon Swanson. On the cold night of May 14, 2008, in the rural areas of Minnesota, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson made a call to his parents that would forever change the course of his life. What began as a simple car incident on a rural road turned into one of the most perplexing missing person cases in recent American history. The call he made to his parents, seemingly routine in nature, turned out to be the last time anyone heard his voice, leaving behind an enigma that still persists, an undisclosed truth that continues to puzzle authorities, journalists, and the community. Brandon's story did not start unusually for a young man his age. Brandon was a calm, hard-working young man with aspirations. He had been celebrating a friend's graduation in the town of Canby, located in southwestern Minnesota. Around midnight, he decided to return to his home in Marshall, a larger city nearby, not realizing that his journey would turn into an odyssey of uncertainty and terror. A few miles from home, the young man took an alternate route through rural roads. Apparently, his GPS suggested a shortcut that turned out to be a fatal mistake. The road became increasingly difficult, dark, and solitary. According to investigators' reports and case reconstructions, Brandon was in a remote area with few landmarks. While driving, his vehicle got stuck in a ditch in the middle of the night, leaving him with no immediate way out. While trying to free himself from his predicament, Brandon attempted to contact his parents. It was then that, at 1:54 a.m., he called his father, Brian Swanson, to ask for help. "Dad, I'm stuck. I can't get out of here," Brandon said in the first call. What seemed like a simple inconvenience quickly turned into a terrifying account. After a brief conversation with his father, who advised him to wait in place while he came to his aid, Brandon decided to leave the car and walk in search of help. His intention was to walk toward a more accessible area, possibly a nearby farm or road. However, a minute later, he made a second call to his parents, sounding visibly anxious and nervous. "Oh my God!" were the last words Brandon uttered before the call abruptly ended. Brandon's final words left the Swansons in deep confusion. What had happened? Why was he so alarmed? What was going on in that dark rural area of Minnesota? Initially, his parents thought the call had dropped due to a lack of signal or some technical issue with the phone, but the growing concern led them to take immediate action. Brian and his wife, Lisa, set out to search for him, fearing the worst. The environment where Brandon disappeared was, on one hand, ideal for the calm and safety of the residents, but on the other hand, very inhospitable and far from urban centers. The township of Lyon, where the rural road was located, was known for its tranquility and low crime rates, making Brandon's disappearance even more unsettling. The absence of streetlights and the sparse signage on the rural roads created an atmosphere of growing uncertainty, making it harder to trace Brandon. Local authorities were alerted around 2 a.m., and the search began immediately. However, the situation worsened as the hours passed. The police, along with rescue teams, scoured the area using off-road vehicles and lighting equipment to illuminate the dark roads. What appeared to be a common disappearance of a young man on a routine trip quickly turned into a strange and unsettling puzzle, especially since Brandon's phone continued to emit location signals pointing to an area even further from the road. Was Brandon walking in the wrong direction? Had he suffered a more serious accident than expected? The first hours of the search were fruitless. The police and rescue teams found no trace of the young man. Initial investigations started to raise more questions than answers. Brandon's phone location kept showing an erratic pattern, indicating that he wasn't in the place his parents thought he'd made his last call. What had happened in those crucial moments that left the police utterly baffled? As the search continued over the following days, witness accounts became crucial pieces of the puzzle. Some claimed to have seen lights in the distance, suggesting that Brandon might have been in a nearby area, but nothing definitively corroborated his final location. In fact, efforts to track his mobile phone through cell towers were equally confusing, as the device appeared to be located in contradictory places, as if Brandon was moving back and forth without a clear direction. The case of Brandon Swanson was not only perplexing because of his disappearance itself, but because of the circumstances surrounding his last communication with his family. The enigma of his final words, "Oh my God," echoed in the ears of everyone involved in the case, like a warning that was never explained. The Swansons, unable to find a logical answer, were left facing the relentless reality that their son had disappeared under the most mysterious of circumstances. On May 17, 2008, 3 days after the disappearance, an unexpected discovery occurred. A group of searchers found Brandon's vehicle in the exact spot where it had gotten stuck, without it having been moved. This added another layer of mystery to the case. If Brandon had abandoned his car on his own, why hadn't he made his way to a more accessible area? What had driven him to leave the safety of his vehicle in the dark of night? The fundamental question remained: what had happened in those final moments? Meanwhile, the police continued to search for any clue that could shed light on his disappearance, but nothing suggested that Brandon had been the victim of a violent crime or a serious accident. The clues seemed to lead nowhere, and the case remained a deep enigma. At this point, the only thing clear was that Brandon Swanson was missing, and every day that passed took him further from his family, his home, and any answer that could bring peace. With each unexpected twist in the investigation, the case grew even more intriguing, and the mystery remained as deep as the very forest of Minnesota where he vanished for the last time. The search for Brandon Swanson continued for weeks, but the answers remained elusive. After several days of intense investigations and the discovery of his vehicle at the same location where it had been stuck, authorities began to formulate new theories about his disappearance. Meanwhile, the community of Marshall remained on edge, and the Swanson family, devastated by the uncertainty, began to lose hope of finding Brandon alive. However, the investigation was far from over, and new twists in the case began to turn what seemed like a solved mystery into a maze of unanswered questions. Although investigators found Brandon's car, the absence of clear clues about his whereabouts left open the possibility of multiple theories. The vehicle was intact, with no signs of damage, which suggested that Brandon had abandoned the car voluntarily. If he had been involved in a serious accident, the police expected to find more evident traces: blood, vehicle damage, or some other indication of physical struggle. However, the scene was surprisingly clean, leading investigators to question the logic of Brandon simply leaving the car without leaving any traces behind. One of the first details that sparked police curiosity was Brandon's final call to his parents. Although he seemed to be distressed, the conversation didn't indicate that he was in imminent danger, nor did it suggest he was being attacked. It was, instead, the abrupt tone of his farewell, his cry of terror, "Oh my God," that left investigators puzzled. What had happened in those last moments? The uncertainty surrounding that call left the Swansons with more questions than answers. An important detail emerged when authorities began tracking Brandon's mobile phone. Through the cell towers, it was determined that his phone had emitted signals at several different points, but without a clear pattern. The most puzzling location was an area known as Long Lake, a wooded area that was in the opposite direction from where Brandon had indicated he was going to walk. This raised a new hypothesis. Had Brandon attempted to take a different route, perhaps looking for a quicker way out, or had something diverted him toward an even more remote area? As the weeks went by and searches continued without result, darker theories began to emerge. Some suggested that Brandon had been the victim of a kidnapping. The idea that someone could have been waiting in the area and taken the young man caught the attention of detectives, but the lack of concrete evidence soon left this theory in speculative territory. The police questioned several witnesses and people close to Brandon, but no one seemed to have relevant information about anyone who might have had a motive to abduct him. Brandon's friends and family had no reason to suspect a close enemy, and the young man's relationship with his family and friends appeared completely normal. This line of investigation, though plausible, was soon dismissed due to the lack of physical evidence indicating the presence of a kidnapper. Once the darker theories were exhausted, the police began to focus on a more grounded explanation: a tragic accident. Although initial evidence hadn't pointed to any catastrophic event, authorities suggested that Brandon may have suffered an accident while walking through the dark countryside. Perhaps, while walking down the desolate path, he slipped, fell and was seriously injured, unable to call for help. According to this theory, his distress during the final call could have been the result of an unexpected fall or an encounter with a wild animal. This possibility, while not entirely ruling out a criminal act, seemed to be the most logical as the investigation moved forward. To explore this theory, the area's maps were reviewed, and new searches were conducted in the areas near Long Lake. For weeks, rescue teams ventured into the forests, using tracking dogs and diving equipment, but they found no trace of Brandon or his body. Every time the authorities thought they were getting closer to a clue, the case took an unexpected turn. Frustration mounted, and the questions remained unanswered. Brandon Swanson's disappearance not only affected his family, but also left a lasting impact on the Marshall community. The anguish of the Swansons was palpable, and the absence of answers only heightened the pain of uncertainty. News of Brandon's disappearance spread widely in the local media, creating a sense of unease in the small town. Residents began to question whether something darker and more dangerous was lurking in their peaceful surroundings. The emotional toll of this disappearance was profound. Brandon's mother, Lisa Swanson, recounted in several interviews how the absence of her son had left an empty void in her life. "We never imagined this would be the end. No one can understand what it feels like to lose someone this way. With no answers, no closure," Lisa said. The uncertainty had altered not just her life, but the lives of everyone who knew Brandon. In an unexpected turn of events, in 2019, a breakthrough in the investigation revealed new clues about the case. That year, the Lyon County Police Department revealed that a group of private investigators had found crucial information about Brandon's whereabouts. Using advanced data analysis technology and testimonies from witnesses, the investigation began to take shape. The final results suggested that Brandon, apparently, had been walking through the woods toward a remote area, but he never made it out of the wooded zone. Brandon Swanson's remains were finally found near a stream that runs close to Long Lake, more than 10 miles from the spot where he had abandoned his vehicle. The cause of death was determined to be an accident, but the explanation of how he ended up in such a remote area remained unclear. The anguish of the Swansons was never fully alleviated, as the question of why Brandon was in that far-off place, so far from his car, was never definitively answered. Although the case of Brandon Swanson was resolved legally, many questions remain. Why did Brandon leave his vehicle in the middle of the night for no apparent reason? Why did he choose to walk through such a dangerous area? How did he end his last moments in the darkness of a solitary forest? Although his cause of death was eventually declared an accident, Brandon's story leaves a deep mark in the history of disappearances in the United States. The tragedy of Brandon Swanson serves as a chilling reminder of the mysteries that still persist in our society, of the unanswered questions that haunt us, and of the human ability to vanish into the darkest corners of existence, leaving behind only hazy traces. As people continue to search for answers, this case remains a testament to the fragility of human life and how, sometimes, in the shadows of the night, there are stories that will never be fully resolved.
The questions don't end here, nor does our pursuit. If this story unveiled something you never expected to discover, then you're in the right place. Remember to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this tale with others who, like you, are drawn to the unknown. Here, mystery always finds its voice, until we meet again, where the inexplicable will once again serve as our starting point.